Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining me. Today, I will talk about, I think, a very important topic when it comes to EV, electric vehicle integration in the world. I will share some data when it comes to what it looks like and how it impacts oil production demand and exports, and kind of where we go from here. So, hopefully, you get lots of value from that. So, you know that significant amount of effort, billions and billions of dollars, was invested in global electric car integration in the world, and this is from global electric vehicle market in 2024. And as you can see here, global electric fleet essentially growing in a very high rate. And yet the current, according to 2023, the global electric car fleet integration is about 40 million vehicles, right? So today it could be more, it could be maybe, let's say, 50 million. So let's say 50 million vehicles, electric vehicles, has been integrated. And now the question is, does it make a big impact on oil production demand, on products demand in the world, and what kind of influence it has on basically displacing the typical ICE vehicles, so internal combustion engine vehicles? And let's look at that. So we can all agree that 2023, it's about 40 million vehicles. That includes the various Teslas, the Bolts, and all electric vehicles in the world. And let's say even if we produce at this rate, those vehicles, maybe like 50 million vehicles in 2024, maybe by 2025 we get maybe 60 million vehicles. So let's kind of give a lot of kind of credit to electric vehicles and their growth. Okay, so that growth is substantial. But in the context of overall world vehicle utilization, as you can see here, what is that question? How many vehicles we use in overall in the world? And you can see a map here by Hedges and Company. So they were kind enough to publish this map on their website. And as you can see here, we have different regions and we have vehicles that being integrated in the world. So this is overall internal combustion engine, all vehicles essentially. How many cars are in the world in 2023? So here in North America, you see 358 million. So I guess it includes Canada, United States, Mexico. South America, 84 million. Europe, 413 million. Middle East, 50 million only. Africa, 26 only. Asia, 543. And what's really intriguing about this is in overall basically utilization of electric vehicles is about 1.475 or so billion vehicles. So 1.475. And let's say by 2024, we have some growth here of vehicles. And let's say if we kind of simplify it, we're at about 1.5 billion vehicles in overall. And so now it's really important to understand the ratio of the electric vehicles that we see here to the ratio of overall vehicles utilized in the world. And if you take, let's say, that 1.5 billion, so you say, let's say 50 million vehicles EVs, right? And we divide that by the 1500 on the billion ratio for overall vehicles, we get somewhere close to 3% integration, which means that the ICE vehicles and all other vehicles we have, they're about 97% utilization right now. So if I was to tell you that McDonald's been operating and taking the entire market share of the fast food business, and then there's this small restaurant that opened that's growing exponentially, just like electric vehicles, and right now it's taken 3% after significant investment of the overall, the EV integration in the world, but it's taken only 3% of the overall kind of utilization of the vehicles. You will say, okay, well, yeah, it's happening, but it's not, um, that bad for the other vehicles to continue growing. The other important angle here that I want to talk about is the population, right? So in North America, for example, we have 350 million or so in United States. We have about 44 million in Canada. So I would say that number is actually close to the number of vehicles utilized. And plus you add Mexico there, which is important. But in Asia, you utilize only 543 million vehicles. And in India only, so in India you have what, 1.4 billion people. And in China you have another 1.4 billion people. So the comparison here versus like 1 point, let's say 4 billion people here in this region between Canada and the United States. So this is like 2.8 billion, this is zero point 0.4, and yet the utilization is 543 million and 358. So there is this kind of mismatch on the consumption. And one could say, okay, well, if United States were integrating more EV vehicles, let's say, or Canada, then those vehicles, the cheaper cuts from gasoline will be moved to maybe the Asian countries to because they will be cheaper. And so now let's look at that. So here is a good kind of summary of what was I just saying. And in my tweet here, I said, well, is there a good reason why the United States consumes more petroleum products as China and India combined, where U.S. population is 0.33 billion, now it's probably 0.35, and China population is 0.8 billion. And you can see here that mismatch that I'm talking about, that in 2019, United States products utilization out of the 100 million barrels per day, so barrels per day utilization, United States consumed about 20% of that, while China and India combined used 20% of that. But the population in the United States is like 0.35 billion, where this population here is 1.4 and 1.4 billion, so 2.8 altogether. So there's this kind of mismatch on the per person metric, like so barrels per person utilized, where I would want to think that in the world where we grow and people consume more and get a fridge and maybe a car and a better bigger like house in other countries, then they would want maybe utilize a little bit more energy. So now let's talk about what's inside each barrel. And I think that the angle here to look at that could be from a perspective where, okay, let's say the red part, which is the gasoline part, is not required anymore because of electric vehicle integration. So let's say, so gasoline is red here, so this part maybe we don't need that. But at the same time, and here what you actually see, you see light crude oil comparison to very heavy oil crude. So here we're basically trying to understand in this chart the percentages of products that can be extracted from a barrel of conventional light crude oil and what can be extracted from a barrel of heavy crude oil, right? And kind of the impact, and then we will try to kind of relate it back um, to the EV integration. Okay, so the other products that are being consumed, you can see from the heavy and the light, are basically diesel oil, fuel oil, so jet fuel, stuff like this. Other products, soon we'll talk about them, and residual and heavy oils, which is in the heavier oils, basically in the Canadian oils. This will be about 30% of those, right, of the barrel. And the diesels and the heavier fuels will be that big blue, which is about 60%. So 60% of the overall heavy barrel will be like products that are heavier and heavy fuels and asphalt. So something to build roads for, with where we don't really have an alternative, right? You could use, I guess, bricks and wood to put on highways, but this is just not something that our society does as we go forward, especially with growing populations in Asia, right? So if you, let's say, eliminate the gasoline, which we know you can, because currently utilization from the vehicles in ICE vehicles or gasoline utilization vehicles is 97%. But then the key question is, and I want you to think about this: if you remove, let's say, those the red color essentially from light crude and heavy, where does it go? Like, we don't need it anymore. But the supply demand tells us that if there is still demand for those products in the world, right, in the broader world, like China, India, then the product moves and its price declines. So it's being sold for a discount essentially. Now let's look what's really in the distillation column. I took this from Aziz from Twitter. I don't know where he got it from, but you can see kind of the various partitioning, and that will answer the question: what is the green and blue colors, which could be other kind of products. So basically, you to refine the oil. So this is crude oil, where it's first sent to basically a refinery. It's being heated in the furnace, and then you see this. It goes inside a distillation column, and there's kind of vapor pressure partitioning for different products, right? So when you heat to highest temperatures, you're basically able to kind of remove the gases, so the natural gases, the ethanes essentially, the CO2s, and then create various degrees, vaporization degree levels, other products. So the naphthas, for example, gasoline, and assume we don't need that, but we need the other products, so we go further, right? So 390 degrees Fahrenheit, we need the kerosene. So for home heaters, jet fuel, we can't really put a battery today on a plane and fly across oceans. So we will need that cut. Gas oils, diesel fuels, right? We'll need that for heavy machinery, especially if we're going to be extracting more lithium for lithium batteries to utilize more EV integration in the world. Lubricants, motor oil, fuel for ships on bigger level, and obviously at the bottom of the heaviest cut is the asphalts, so basically the tar. And the question is, like I was saying before, is let's say if you don't need that cut anymore, if you don't need as much gasoline anymore, what do you do with it? Because you can't really refine the distillation column without vaporizing the naphthas and the gasolines, right? So you have to go kind of deeper and get the other products as well as you integrate these products in the world consumption, like plastics, like our phones that we have, my glasses here that I use, that being for petrochemical utilizations, right? Like different plastics, like different bottles that we consume. Even like the simplest things that all around us in utilizing our daily lives. And so in a sense, what I'm saying here is that I'm seeing a very hard time where gasoline is not being produced as a product, right? Where you don't produce it. The question is, what do you do with it? Even though right now you will use it because 97% of world vehicle integration is not EV, right? So, and then if you think about this, the question is, okay, well, if United States, USA, let's say integrated EVs, right? So went to full EVs due to a certain mandate. And what do you do with that gasoline? So the question is, they're going to probably ship it somewhere else and sell it for cheaper. But let's see what's been going on in the recent years with United States product exports. So this is a chart from EIA. So EIA stands for Energy Information Administration for the United States. And you can see a 4-week average on US exports for total petroleum products. So this is in million barrels per day. So how much United States exports. And you see essentially an exponential growth in exports where in 2010, United States exported about 2 million barrels, 2 million barrels per day. But today, United States exports close to 7 million barrels per day. 7. So, and at the same time, the question is, okay, well, if there is further integration, then those barrels essentially are going somewhere else. Those products are going somewhere else and being utilized in the world, right? So then, and those entities, they're growing as well because there's a developing market. And so that's why I think it's really important to kind of keep in the context of everything I talked about, is that when we have light crude oil, very heavy crude oil, I think in a sense that makes the very heavy crude oil very valuable because it has more products that are not gasoline like products. And we don't really have an alternative for electric plane integration right now, right? We're like maybe decades away from achieving that. At the same time, the gasoline cut that you can see in this refining column is going to go somewhere else. It's going to be exported to developing markets that demand those products. At the same time, we talked about the mismatch between populations in China, populations in India, and United States. So 0.35 or so billion people versus 2.8 billion people combined in India and China. And there is high demand for the products going forward as those populations develop. And basically, the barrel per person utilization is increasing because naturally the human need is to grow, is to develop, is to get more. So we can be selfish in North America and say like only we deserve to have a nice house or a nice car. Maybe people in India, maybe people in China, maybe people in developing world want to have things that we have. So that's kind of the perspective I think we need to adopt a little bit more. Obviously, the global electric car fleet integration been significant, as I shared here. So we're heading towards 50 million, maybe 60 million vehicles integration. But if you look at the overall utilization in the world, it's a very small part of it. And then the key question that I wanted to address is that what happens to gasoline cut? And I think the exports from United States are basically suggesting already that many of the products are being exported and utilized elsewhere. So there is and there will continue to be a need for basically oil production and energy utilization. I don't think it's an opinion. I think it's just a fact. Thank you.